My literacy timeline. There are many factors that have contributed to the creation of me as an individual. These factors can more specifically be referred to as people. The people I am about to mention have not only impacted different parts of my personality, but also different sections of my literacy identity. The first person I'd like to mention is my father. Growing up, he was always there to support me and help me out in my learning of English and in my learning how to read. One book that I distinctly remember reading with him day after day was entitled I Love You Forever. This became our father-daughter book and we read it all the time. It's a wonderful story about a mother and her son and the great lengths she would go through for him. I never had a lack of love in my life, so I very easily felt a connection with the boy in the story. I knew every day that my daddy loved me because he never ceased to tell me. Since my father read this book with me, it always held major importance and I made sure to read it with every single one of my cousins as they grew up. So thanks to my father for reading this to me, reading became somewhat of a tradition in the family, and it helped to grow my love and passion for reading. The next person who helped nurture my love of reading is my godmother, Ida Rosario. She is always looking out for my best interests, even at a young age. It makes sense that she would want to do so because she was once an elementary school teacher herself. One tradition we had that she loved to do is to go on a girls' day together and let me pick out where I wanted to eat and pick out what store I wanted to go to. Since I always wanted to impress her, I would usually ask to go to my favorite bookstore, Borders. I loved going there with her because she would give me recommendations on books and she'd help me branch out onto different genres that I didn't know very much about. That meant that thanks to her, I made it a habit of going to the store and getting new books to read on a regular basis, a habit that I carried on when I would go out with my mother. And then every time I would see my godmother, I would tell her about the book that she bought me and all the other ones that I have read since the last time I saw her. Speaking of my mother, she is another major reason that I enjoy reading as much as I do. Every summer, and any time that she was free, she made it a point to take me to the public library. My mom's English was not that great, and she really didn't read many books to me, especially not in public. But what she did enjoy was picking out some books that she liked and telling me to read them to her. I loved to do that for her any chance I had because it helped me feel like such a big girl. I was teaching my mom something and making her happy too. I remember it like it was just a few days ago. The kids' corner of the library with her special couch, a stack of books 5 or 6 high, and all the time in the world to read, and read some more. I couldn't think of why anyone wouldn't like reading. It's something so simple I can do that can make so many other people happy, just like it makes my mom happy. Then there was elementary school. I went to Tucker Avenue and I was in a pull-out ESL class until the 3rd grade. I can sum up the experience of those classes in 4 words. Waste of my time. The teacher didn't teach me anything helpful, and our activities for structured practice and application was always the same thing. A crossword puzzle where the words were random. They had nothing to do with anything I was currently learning. To be free to go back to class, we had to finish the puzzle and read the words aloud. I don't remember it ever doing me much good, but what did help a lot was a book I read as a class in the 1st grade. It was called Mr. Popper's Penguins. That was the first chapter book I ever encountered, and it was scary and frustrating. I got nervous if we did popcorn readings or if I ever had to read the book out loud. I just couldn't do it alone. But my teacher took time to make sure I knew I didn't have to be nervous and told me to just listen to my classmates and try to follow the words on the page as they read. Once we got to the last chapter, she had been practicing reading a paragraph out loud with me, and I read it in the class. I was proud. I was confident. I felt like I was finally a good reader too. It seemed that my teacher was proud of me too, because she gave me a copy of the book to keep, and she wrote me a note inside the front cover to never stop reading no matter how hard it seemed. She was the person who helped me transition from having books read to me by adults like my father to reading books on my own and reading books to my mother in the library. So, what is my literacy identity? I believe that a love for reading needs to be nurtured, not forced. My parents, my teachers, my family never forced me to read. It was just another option of something that I could do to pass the time. Well, there were not really many video games in the house when I was young, just a Super Nintendo, and I did not dare to touch it because it was my dad's, and only big kids played with it. So games were sort of out of the question. My mother would usually be watching telenovelas on the living room TV, and those aren't for kids, so I couldn't do that. And rewatching my Disney VHS tapes could only entertain me for so long. Besides, I didn't know how to play the movies and change the input all on my own. So I took to reading. I read and I read and I read. I asked my dad to tell me bedtime stories and I learned. I learned as much as I could because I wanted to make my family proud. I was the first generation born here, and I wanted to make my mark. I read because I wanted to, not because I had to. But then my cousins started sprouting up here and there, and they were being compared to me. Why don't you read like Kimberly? And why can't you be smart like Kimberly? Well, no wonder they didn't want to read. They were practically being pushed away from it, because if they did read, it wouldn't be because they wanted to. It would feel like they were reading so they could be more like me. So I am a firm believer in letting children pick out their favorite books and giving them time to read it. Not only read it, but reread it. Let them invest their time and heart into a book. Let them experience it like new every time they read it. Don't push them to read something more challenging. Just be happy that they are reading. This book series that you have been looking at for a while now is by far my favorite book series. I read it when I'm sad and need a pick-me-up. I read it when I'm happy and I know it will make me happier. I read it when I'm nostalgic. I read it when I want to fall in love again. I read it when I want to experience high school again. I read it whenever I have the chance. This book series, specifically the first one in the series, is something I started reading in ninth grade, and the last book in the series came out when I was a senior in high school. I grew with the characters. I made them my family. I went through high school at the same time they did. And that's what reading should be about, finding something you love and losing yourself in it. Because when that happens, you will never forget about it.